Dedicated to God from the womb, he will take the lead in delivering Israel from the hand of the Philistines. At this time, the young and young at heart can go over to the 3D table. Got some activities for you over there as we take a look at one of the most famous Bible stories out there. Well, Rowan and I actually had a conversation on the way in this morning. And he asked me a question. He said, "Dad, if you could have any special power, what would it be?" And I got to think about that one. If you guys could have any special power, what would it be? I'm going to put it to you. Ooh, the ability to stop and start time. So you want the superpower of being rested without actually affecting anything else. That would be cool. So, okay, I like that. So what else? What are the superpowers? Teleportation for Rowan.
I would just have super speed.
Super speed.
Mine would be to turn invisible whenever I want to.
Ooh, okay. Okay, come on, some more adults. What have you got? Any superpower, what would it be? No one? Nobody wants any superpowers? Or you just can't think of one?
To wiggle my nose like Samantha.
To do what?
To wiggle my nose like Samantha.
Do some bewitched and...
When I was young, I had this daydream of being able to stretch my arms or legs or whatever, and be able to
It's kind of like a Mr. Fantastic, kind of Fantastic Four. Yep.
something like that.
See, I always kind of struggle with that one there because it feels like a lot of people, they would go with like the super strength, you know. I want to be super strong. But I never liked that one because it just seemed too basic. So I decided that I think that what I want the ability to do is to move things with my mind. You know, it's telekinesis. Yeah, because that way if I could move things with my mind, I could pick myself up and fly somewhere. You know, because I could move myself and just do that. You know, but superheroes are kind of a big thing. I mean, right now you've got DC competing with Marvel, industries to create all these superhero movies. You even go back in time. I mean, it's just like throughout history, there's been this desire to see superhuman strength, these heroes, the different things that they can do to fight crime and to just do all this good stuff. And I got to be honest, one of my favorite lines actually does not come from a superhero, but from a superhero's uncle. So when Peter Parker, who's Spider-Man, is struggling with his newfound gifts, his uncle doesn't realize that Peter is going through all this stuff, but gives him this advice that says, just with great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's one of the most profound lines in literature, to be honest with you. But, you know, especially when it comes from comic books. But it's just like, it's this great thing. It's this great thought. You wouldn't think that Stan Lee, when he was creating the Spider-Man comic, would be like, I'm going to be philosophical here. You know, but it's a true line. With great power comes great responsibility. And I think there's an attraction towards superheroes, that imagination of what good could I do. But there's always a fault with superheroes that I find. You know, we all know that they have a weakness of some kind, but they also learn to totally rely on whatever strength or power that they have to get them through any and every situation. Yeah, I remember in the movie Superman 2, when the first time I saw it, I was quite young, and if you don't know Superman 2, Superman, he decides that he wants to marry Lois Lane, but he can't do it as Superman. So he goes and voluntarily gives up his powers. And now, when I was young and I first saw this movie, I got to that part, he lost his powers, and I ran out of the room crying and refused to watch the rest of the movie, and then came back in like the last 5 minutes, like, Superman's back? My parents like, well, you should have stayed. Sorry. But after Superman loses his powers, and that when he gives them up, he goes to a diner with Lois, and there's a bully in that diner who starts picking on him, and Superman decides, just Clark Kent at this point in time decides, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to be a man and I'm going to help Lois. But he doesn't have his powers. He doesn't know how to deal with conflict in any way without his powers. And he is completely and utterly humiliated in that situation, in that time. I wonder how much pride Clark Kent and Superman had going into that situation, thinking, I can't be touched. I wonder how much pride people have in any of the gifts and abilities that they have, that think that they can get it out in any situation. And as I've thought about this week, as we go into the story of Samson, how much is pride one of the keys to understanding this classic, ultimate story that we have in the Bible? Because the story of Samson, he is one of the biggest stories. He's a popular story in every single children's Bible storybook. Everybody loves Samson. He's the last of the major judges that we have in the Bible, and his story is really, quite honestly, it's the makings of a Hollywood drama. All right, you've got all this excitement, you've got deceit, you've got violence, you've got romance. Everything you want to see when you go to the movies is packed into these chapters in the Bible. And if you've never read Samson, it's in the book of Judges 13 through 16. I would really suggest reading it. But when you're going to read it, and you're going to close the story, the Bible after the story, and most likely you're going to think to yourself, how is he a hero of faith? How is this guy really? And even Hebrews 11 puts him in there as this man of faith that we're supposed to emulate. But when you read his story, you're kind of like, I don't see how this is something I'm supposed to be attracted to and want to be like. Because you read it and you realize that Samson was really angry. Not just angry, but violently angry. We get upset. If you go and punch a pillow or something like that, people may be like, maybe you need to go get some counseling or something like that. Samson goes and lights fields on fire or destroys something major. He's really, really angry, but he's also boastful. He's proud. He's lustful. He's all the things that a person of faith is not supposed to be. We know we're not supposed to be like that. But Samson, as we saw in the text we read, was also a Nazirite. Now, I don't think does anybody know what a Nazirite is. I would not. Yeah, a couple people do, but not many, right? I'm not surprised. We don't even know a lot about Nazirites. We don't know a whole lot about what they did or who they were, and what we know is pretty vague. If you really want to read up on it, go to Numbers 6, and you'll get a little bit of idea of what the Nazirites were. But ultimately, we don't even then know a lot. We know that a Nazirite was either a man or a woman, and this person would take a vow to be dedicated to God for a certain amount of time. Okay, that's basically what we know. And part of that vow was that they would say, I am not going to touch anything that has anything to do with grapes. So no wine, no grape juice, no vinegar that was made from grape juice, no raisins. Just nothing. No grapes. Don't know why, but just no grapes. And they also won't touch a dead body. And if I'm going to take a Nazirite vow, I also won't cut my hair, which would be the symbol that I am under a vow. And what I'm going to do as my time as a Nazirite, I have no idea. We don't know what they did. We just know they took the vow and they did what they did. And when it was done, they shaved their heads. That's all we know. But Samson was a little bit unusual in this respect because his parents received divine instruction that Samson would be a Nazirite from birth. From birth, Samson was going to be set apart for some special purpose, dedicated to God for some special thing. And we know that he was going to begin to lead, begin to free the people from the Philistines, the people who were oppressing them at this time. So we've been in the book of Judges for a while, so we all know that part of the cycle is you have to have an oppressive power. So this time it just happens to be the Philistines. And so Samson was born, he was going to be set apart, and he was going to free the people from the Philistines or begin that process. Now, his parents know this about him. Now, imagine you're Samson growing up, and you're looking around, and all the other boys are getting their hair cut, short back and sides. Mom, why can't I get my hair cut like all the other boys? Well, Samson, it's because you're special. God has chosen you for a big task, and you're a Nazirite. And you are going to free the people from the Philistines. How much did that impact Samson growing up? to hear this over and over. You're special. You're going to do something amazing. How did that affect his view of God and his view of himself? And then as he gets older, this knowledge that God has set him apart for something special is strengthened and bolstered as things start to happen and he discovers new strength, literally. For example, Samson, he decides that the Philistine girls aren't really all that bad. He kind of likes the Philistine girls. And so he finds one that he wants to date, or in that case, they skip the dating and just go straight to marriage. And so he decides he wants to marry her, convinces his parents. He's going down to meet this lucky young lady, and he is attacked by a lion. Who knows what happens? Yeah, he kills the lion. The lion rushes at him. It says the Spirit of the Lord came on Samson, and Samson ran out, met the lion, and tore it as one would tear a young goat. I've said this before. I don't know what it's like to tear a young goat. It doesn't sound that easy, but apparently it is, because it's just like, it's a young goat. And so, I don't know, it sounds impressive though, doesn't it? It's just like, I don't know what that's like, but it sounds really cool. So he does that and he discovers, wow, I can tear a lion like I can tear a young goat. But that's not all, because then he goes on and he faces other exploits against the Philistines. He fights them off against insane odds, 1,000 to 1. One night, after leaving an interesting evening, he tears off the city gates with his bare hands, tosses it on his back, and goes for a hike. I mean, he became known and feared by the Philistines because of this superhuman strength. But the source of that strength was not his. It was not his own. 3 times in the story of Samson, it says that the Spirit of the Lord came upon him. And each time it was before a fight of some kind. And each time it was before some massive show of strength. So I wonder if this knowledge that he is set apart for God, and these events and these strengths and those conversations with his parents, as they continue to run through his mind, what was going on as he's sitting there? Who am I? I'm a Nazirite. I'm a special person set apart for God's work. I will begin to free the people from the Philistines. Do you think he ever put together the pieces that his strength was really just a gift from God? Was he amazed by it, or did he get used to it? And did he start to expect it? Because when we have a gift or an ability, it's pretty easy to get used to it, isn't it? To kind of just assume that that's what is going to happen when we have our special abilities. We use them and we get confirmation that it's something that we're gifted at, and we have an expectation that it's going to work out, and we have experiences that just strengthen everything that we believe about ourselves and we've been told. I mean, we're commonly taught in today's society that we are special, that we can do anything we set our minds to, that we are set apart. And if it's taken too far, we can believe that there is nothing in life that will be a struggle for us because we're special. We have things coming to us. We deserve these things. We deserve whatever it is that is out there. So I shouldn't struggle to get this job that I want. I shouldn't struggle to get into this area that I want to get into. We had a conversation when I was in seminary, and someone was talking about we could do anything if we just set our minds to it. And I finally said, I will never be a quarterback. I won't. 1, I don't like football a whole lot. 2, I can't throw in a straight line. I can't throw far. I'm just not, that's not my makeup. It's not my build. I'm okay with that. But the response was, if you practiced and you tried, you could do it. And I'm just like, Tim Tebow? He practiced. He tried really hard. Didn't work out so well for him. But the idea that we can do anything, I don't know. But we get this in our mind that we can do anything. It appeared that he had no weaknesses at all for Samson. Well, unless it came to women, right? See, now there's nothing in the Nazirite vow about marriage. Just so you know, a Nazirite can get married. That's okay. So his first marriage didn't end so well. Didn't end very well at all. And he went out and he fell in love with another Philistine woman named Delilah. Now they got married. And Delilah was promptly bribed with this huge amount of money to find out the source of Samson's strength. So she just goes and asks him, Samson, what is it that makes you so strong? Not even just what is it that makes you so strong, but how can you lose your strength? What is your kryptonite? What is the thing that's going to take your strength away from you? So Samson, he toys with her for a bit. He gives her a bunch of false stories. He's like, well, you can bind my hair with bowstrings. You can tie me up with ropes. You can tie my hair into a loom. And she takes each one of those items and does it to Samson and then calls out, Samson, the Philistines are upon you, which promptly he breaks up and goes out and defeats all the Philistines. Now, I do question how bright Samson is, because you get this happening the first time. The second time, you might start to think maybe she's up to something. But after 3 times, you think that he'd be like, okay, this is going somewhere. She's really trying to figure something out. But maybe he's just having fun. It's like, we'll keep this game up for a while. I'm enjoying this. Well, finally, she nags him, and he tells her the truth. I'm a Nazirite. I've been set apart for God, and my long hair, that's a symbol of that. So if you shave my head, my vow is over. Then I'll lose my strength. So she does this. And Samson, she shaves his head and calls out again, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. And I love how the Bible puts it. It says that Samson gets up and he thinks, I'll go out as before and shake myself free. He just assumed it was going to be there. He assumed his strength was from him, only to find out that his strength was gone. So somewhere along the line, Samson actually forgot where his strength come from. He didn't forget that he was a Nazirite. He didn't forget that he was set apart for God's service, but he began to take it for granted. That it would always be there by a simple entitlement. And I think that he began to trust himself in his strength rather than God. That the strength was somehow his by right rather than that gift that God was giving him. It was a subtle shift that we may not even realize what is happening. We may not even realize that our minds are going in that direction. Samson, he assumed the power would just always be there. Now we live in a time where we have the Holy Spirit. Jesus' death and resurrection provided every believer that gift of the Spirit to guide us, to teach us, to empower us for ministry, to take that out there and to expand his kingdom. But just like Samson, we in our giftings can begin to take those things for granted. Pastors and teachers, we can begin to trust in knowledge and experience in crafting sermons and in teaching lessons. We can begin to trust in those things so the effort's not put in them as much because we figured, well, we'll work out. Elders and church leaders can trust in their life experiences to guide the church. All of us can assume that since we have the Holy Spirit and that every inclination that we have, every thought, every desire that we have comes from God, and we don't need to be taught. We don't need to have other people speak into our lives. We can begin to trust these things, and we forget to seek after who God is and for God's leading and wisdom. And we assume that, like Samson, we can just shake off the things that come our way, the troubles and the realities of life. And we can be blinded to the reality that God opposes the proud, as it says in the Bible. He opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. We can forget that our strength and our ability actually comes from the Spirit and comes from God. And that God will humble the proud. Not necessarily as a punishment, but as a simple reminder of where strength comes from, where our giftings come from. Samson, he ended up blind and in prison. And that was where he learned humility. And it was there that he was reminded where his strength came from. Now, occasionally when a Nazirite would be fulfilling his vow, something would happen and he would be defiled. Like he could be hanging out with somebody and the person, it actually says in the Bible, if you're sitting next to somebody and they drop over dead, you need to renew your vow. I don't know how often that happens, but there's one of those things they put in there. So something could happen to a Nazirite, and they would have to go and shave their head and renew their vow and start back over. Well, I kind of get the feeling when you read the story that that's what happened to Samson. Because as he's working in the prison, it says his hair began to grow again. So his head was shaved and his strength was gone, but his hair begins to grow. Something happened with his Nazirite vow, whether he renewed it intentionally or not. The insinuation there is that his setting apart began again. And one day Samson is in prison and there's a big party going on in the temple of Dagon, which was the primary Philistine god. And they're having a huge party and they say, hey, let's bring Samson out. Let's celebrate our victory over Samson and over Yahweh. Let's bring him out. So they bring him out, and they're teasing him, and they're humiliating him as he's stumbling around in his blindness. And Samson only has one request. He says, take me and put me between the pillars that are holding up the temple. So they think Samson's weak. They think he's gone. They think he's done. They think they've won. So Samson goes, and they put him there. And that's where Samson prays for just one more moment of strength. God, give me one more strength, one more time. Let me take revenge on these Philistines. And God used that to show his power over the Philistines, to show his power over Dagon. And Samson pushes those pillars. And I think, if you know the story, the pillars crumble, pushed to the side. The whole temple falls down. Everybody in it is crushed. The people on the roof are killed. A dramatic end to Samson's story, but a powerful display of strength and weakness. And it fits God's pattern, I think, in an amazing way, to show power and weakness. Because Jesus' death on the cross was considered weakness. People thought, he's done. The supposed Son of God, the supposed Messiah, is done. He was weak. He wasn't strong. But then God showed strength in the resurrection. That's why Paul said he would not boast in his strengths, but he would rather boast in his weaknesses, because it was in those moments of his weakness when he had to rely on God's strength, when he had to look to him and say, God, I can't do this on my own. Show me your strength. He learned not to rely on himself, but on the Spirit to give him strength in every situation. Now, I say this not to say that we should not acknowledge our strengths, to say that we should not acknowledge those areas that God has gifted us. I shouldn't say that we shouldn't use them, but we need to remember where they came from and where they do come from. And we can focus on using them for God's glory, relying on God to continue to strengthen us in those areas, not glorifying ourselves, but recognizing where that strength comes from, and that is from him. If you'll pray with me. Heavenly Father, we do thank you that you are a God of strength and a God of power, and that you show your strength in our weakness. And so Lord, I pray that today that we would be looking to you in all things for strength, that we would recognize the gifts that you have given us, but also recognize where they have come from. Lord, so we can give all glory to you as you do show your strength to the world around us. Lord, walk with us this week in your strength and in your power, helping us always to point people back to you. And we pray these things in Jesus' name.